I've done 24 videos with the amplifier open explaining this, but I'm happy to continue explaining it for new viewers. Amplifiers are split into two sections. There is a preamp and control section, which is all 12 volts, even on the high voltage amplifiers. They run things such as the LEDs, the preamp, which takes the RCA signal input and uses op amps to increase the voltage and current for the main driver section. Things like the thermistors, which detect the temperature of the amplifier. For Class D amplifiers, you have, all of the timing circuitry. All of that runs at 12 volts, right? That's the low voltage section. In an amplifier like a 12 volt amp, it's a small section, same here. And then usually on a 12 volt amp, you have most of the section dedicated to taking the 12 volts input and increasing it to over 100 volts for the main power rails, and then a small section of it is dedicated for the actual emitter drivers. Those are the main drivers that take the output from the 12 volt section, right? The small signal from the RCA, which was slightly amplified, and it does the main amplification with the main input. On a high voltage amp, most of the physical space is dedicated to those drivers, right? So RCA goes in, small 12 volt section controls everything, amplifies the signal slightly, and then it drives the main drivers, which take in the high voltage to put out a ton of current and voltage on the output side. On the 12 volt amp, same thing happens, except now you're using most of the space to take that 12 volts up to over 100 volts and then driving a small section for the drivers. So the only difference between these two is that about 80% of what exists here does not need to exist here because it's already high voltage coming in. So essentially, the amplifiers are the same in terms of how they work. The only difference is the voltage amplification section doesn't exist, but you still need 12 volts to drive, again, all the logic circuitry, the small preamp section, the LEDs, the thermistors, all of that stuff.